This happened a few years ago. It was pretty late, past 2 a.m, and I was living with my ex who was pretty abusive, and he'd gotten really jealous at this party that we were at earlier that night. Not even an hour after we'd gotten home, he tossed me out onto the porch and locked the door behind me. I was knocking and pleading for him to let me back inside. I was still wearing what I'd worn to the party and it was freezing out. I wasn't sure what to do. He had my phone, purse and wallet in the house with him, so I just sat on the porch crying. When he turned off the lights both inside and out of the house, I knew he wasn't going to let me back in. I felt so helpless and cold. I thought about knocking on a neighbour's door, though we didn't have very many. But I had anxiety about waking them up and causing trouble for my boyfriend. So instead I decided I would try and walk to the gas station and motel, which was like less than a mile away, so I could try to use their phone and call a friend of mine and see if I could sleep over at her house. A little bit into the walk, this tall, white pickup truck was approaching on the opposite side of the road that I was on. I tried not to make eye contact for obvious reasons, but then I heard the truck stopping and making a U-turn, and my heart just started pounding. I just about froze up, but I forced myself to speed walk at the very least. The truck pulled up beside me and a guy rolled down his window and asked me what I was doing out this late. I told him I was going to meet my friend at the gas station and she was expecting me. He sort of smiled and offered me a ride. I said no thank you, citing that I shouldn't hitchhike. He told me, well good, I don't pick up hitchhikers or anyone. But you don't look like a hitchhiker though. You look like you just need some help. He just kept driving next to me and told me that I shouldn't think he was a creep, and he pulled out what looked like a police badge and told me he had just gotten off duty, which was why he was in civilian clothes and out so late. He said he wouldn't mind driving next to me just to make sure I get to where I was heading safely. I was naive and a little bit too trusting of his kindness and his credentials, and when he offered me a ride again, I said that it would be nice because the gas station wasn't that far away anyway. He popped the door open for me and I hopped in. The radio was low, it was a little messy. The ashtray was full of cigarettes. There were a lot of newspapers on the passenger floor. As I was moving my feet, some of the papers shifted, showing a pair of handcuffs, some coffee cups, empty water bottles, rags, a highlight-coloured bandana and some other things. He apologised, saying that it was the truck he took hunting, but it was super warm so I was happy and I didn't mind at all. He told me his name was John. He asked why I was so scantily dressed without a jacket, and I started to tell him all about the party and the fight I'd had with my boyfriend. He was super charming and attentive. He even laughed that he could go back and arrest him. I asked about him, and he told me about his family. He was a young dad. He had a wife, a daughter, a son, and a dog. And I told him that he was like he had the perfect little family, and he laughed and said he certainly did. Then it sort of clicked for me to ask him if I could use his phone, but he said no because he had to save his battery. We were approaching the gas station, and he drove right past it. I politely said, "Oh, I think that's the one," but he didn't answer me. I felt sick to my stomach, my heart started pounding. I started getting choked up. My eyes started tearing up as I was looking out the windows and watching the lights behind us get further and further away. It was hard for me to even speak, but somehow I murmured, asking if he could please turn around, and he ignored me again. Whenever I would look at him, he would just look empty-eyed and emotionless, totally dead and glazed. I looked back out the window and down the road to see if maybe we were going slow enough that I could maybe make a leap out of the car without seriously injuring myself. I remember always hearing, never go to the second location, but I thought about the possibility of jumping out and breaking an ankle and how hard it would be to get away with just 1 foot as opposed to 2. Debating with myself that there was a lot of snow on the ground, but then again, snow is hard to get along in, especially when you're not fully clothed. I felt so dumb now too, because I wasn't even tied up or anything. I was just so scared though. Like, there was nothing but trees, an empty road, and us. I was crying pretty badly at this point, and I asked if I could borrow his phone again. I don't know why I even asked this, and he just told me to stop talking. Then he started talking underneath his breath, saying, "Girls shouldn't be out so late. You shouldn't be out alone like this. You shouldn't be out alone this late. Look what you've done. Look what you're doing to me. Just like a slut." And other derogatory things. As he kept saying these terrible things, way too many to say on here, I wasn't even responding. I was just crying and trying to think past the fear I was feeling. I remembered the handcuffs on the floor, so I used that little, I don't know how to describe it, like scoopy motion. Managed to use my feet to scoop the handcuffs up and use my heel and my toes to push them under the bottom of my seat as far as I could. I was thinking of different things I could do to try and help myself. Like, if we were close enough to some upcoming lights or structures, if I ever made it to them, I could just grab the wheel and cause us to crash into them. Or maybe how if I got lucky enough for a cop to pass us, I could just grab the wheel and swerve so we could hear he was drunk and a drunk driver, so maybe we'd get pulled over. I thought about the possibility that if this man was just having a weird night and how if I did do anything, it might hurt him, but I also told myself that this sort of thinking is what brought me to this mess. Cold off-road where there was still woods on both sides of On his side, the wooded trees were closer to the road, but on my side, there was a small gap fully covered in thick snow. Before the trees thickly picked up, maybe 10 to 16 yards away, he turned off the car and coldly said that there was something wrong with the car and to get out with him. As he grabbed the keys and was stepping out the car, I grabbed onto the centre console and cried and pleaded not to make me get out with him because it was too cold. He turned around to face me, his door still open, and shouted at me to get out of the car because we had to go check out the trunk bed hatch. I dug my fingernails deep into the console, thinking my cries would no, and head shaking would cause him to come around to my side of the car and drag me out himself. I was crying and said, "Please, John, I'm so cold, I'm scared." I was thinking of everything I ever heard. Humanise yourself, use first names. He stared at me in this way that I can't even describe to this day, and I don't even know how to start. He got back in the car and I slinked towards my window, scared he would drag me over the console. He turned off the headlights and everything just pushed out of blue. He stared at the steering wheel for what felt like years before lighting a cigarette and looking out of his window, and then back to me in the back out of his window. He heard me shuffle my feet on the newspapers. I was just adjusting my legs. But while he was still staring out the window, he told me if I thought about running, he had a quick way to get me back where he wanted me. And oddly enough, I was sort of thinking of running minutes before that, but the reason that if he wanted me out of the car, then I should definitely stay in. Otherwise he could try and chase me or shoot me in case he had his hunting rifles in the back. I didn't know. I'm glad I was right. I think at that point I sort of hit some sort of bottom of my reserve, and instead of panic, there was just this numbness and exhaustion. There was still an occasional hot tear or two, but I just remember feeling so numb. I talked to a psychiatrist about this sort of thing, and he thinks it just came from my ex-boyfriend giving me PTSD. It was dead quiet, but I finally, just barely audibly, told him that my friend was still waiting for me and asked about his wife and children, and he flatly said he didn't have a wife or children and that his house was empty. I asked him what he was thinking about, and he said, "I'm thinking of what to do with you." He didn't say it angrily, he just said it flatly and coldly, which sort of scared me even more. I did start getting worked back up to a cry at that point, and he told me not to cry and turned the car on, offering some heat. And he turned the car on, offering me some heat. I just cried and said I wanted to go home. Eventually, started driving and kept driving until we were approaching a gas station. I was gauging the right time to reach for the steering wheel, but before I could, he started slowing down. While pulling up, he told me not to tell anyone, or he would find me. Then he told me all he was doing was teaching me a lesson not to hitchhike with strangers. He was almost coming to a complete stop when he told me to get out before he changes his mind. Before he could even get another look towards me to assess my understanding, I was already down out of the truck, sprinting towards the gas station. The panic was overwhelming me, but then I stopped and remembered to try and see his license plate. I turned around but only caught the blur of the last 3 numbers as he was driving off. I ran inside and asked the clerk behind the counter to please call the police. I waited until the officer got there, and I'll be honest, I was a little scared it would be John. My fears melted away when the new-faced policeman got there. I gave him the description of John, his appearance, the vehicle colour and type, the parts of the licence plate number I had caught, the fact he said he was an off-duty cop, just basically anything I could. I asked him if he could look at the camera, and the officer disappeared in the back for a little bit, then came back out saying there was nothing on them. I asked if I would be able to look, and the officer said no and asked me if I didn't trust him, and I told him of course I did. The officer gave me a ride to my friend's house, lecturing me for hitchhiking, constantly, repeatedly asking me if I knew who Ted Bundy was. I never heard anything back about the report that was made, but at the end of the day, I'm just really glad I didn't get out of the car in the woods that night. I hope this helps other people and they take something from this story, because it could have been so much worse for me had I gotten out.